If you've ever driven through the Mojave long enough, you know there are places where the world goes quiet in a way that feels wrong. Not peaceful, wrong. Like the land is holding its breath. Like something unseen is crouched just past the horizon, waiting for you to step out of your car, wander too far, blink at the wrong moment. That's the kind of place I work. A lonely gas station, miles from anything that resembles civilization. No towns nearby. No police station, no diner, no little desert church with a rusted bell and a smiling pastor. Just sand, wind, bleached highway bones, and a pump canopy that looks like it's been here since the dawn of asphalt. My shift starts at sunset and ends whenever my manager decides I'm done learning. My name doesn't really matter. Not in the way it used to. Here, I'm just the attendant, the one who fills the pumps, restocks stale snacks, sweeps dust off the concrete even when the wind replaces it faster than I can brush it away, the one who keeps the rules. But that part, those rules, came later. First, I just needed a job. Any job.
Anywhere that wasn't the life I left behind. You don't run from your life without good reason.
Mine came wrapped in grief and anger, in mistakes and pressure I couldn't outrun until I actually outran them. I drove with no destination, chasing an emptiness that felt cleaner than the mess I'd come from. And then the desert swallowed me. Heat shimmered on the highway like molten glass. My AC died 3 hours back. My radio drifted in and out of static, whispering fragments of stations that shouldn't have been broadcasting in this stretch of dust and death. I hadn't seen another car in nearly 90 minutes when I spotted the sign. Gas. Food. Ice, 3 faded words on sun-rotted metal. The only living thing in a world of sand was a half-broken hawk circling the sky like it was debating whether I'd make an easy meal. The station sat crouched against the wind, a rectangular block of beige stucco and rattling glass. The gas pumps were old enough to need manual resets. A flickering neon open sign buzzed in the window even though it was still broad daylight. Nobody else was around. Not a car, not a truck, not even a stray dog desperate enough to wander this wasteland. A single pickup truck was parked behind the building. The paint had peeled a lifetime ago. One tire looked like it had never been inflated. The little bell above the door chimed when I walked in. The air smelled like dust and old coffee. Shelves lined with cans, chips, and trucker necessities stood in neat but fading order. Behind the counter sat a man with sunken eyes and skin leathered deep by decades of desert wind. He looked up, slow and deliberate, like lifting his head required thought. "You need work?" he asked, not hello, not can I help you. Not even you lost, just that. A simple question dropped in the dry air like a stone into a still well. I hesitated. "Yeah, I guess I do." He studied me without blinking, then nodded as if he'd already decided everything about me. "You start tonight." That should have been my first clue that something was wrong. But when you're running from your life, red flags look like lifelines. His name is Harlan. Thin, wiry white hair curling around the edges of a sun-bleached cap. A face that looks like it's been carved out of sandstone by wind and regret. No handshake, no paperwork, no training. Just a laminated sheet pulled from beneath the counter. Thick laminate, edges worn like fingers had traced them over and over. "Read these," he said. "Memorize them. Follow them. Don't improvise." His voice wasn't threatening. It wasn't even stern. It was tired. Tired in a way that suggested he'd watched far too many people ignore warnings they shouldn't have ignored. I tried to laugh it off. "Okay, workplace guidelines? Safety stuff." He didn't smile back. "No," he said quietly. "Survival." I don't know why that word slid under my skin the way it did. Maybe it was the way he spoke, flat and final, like he'd said it too many times before. Maybe it was the desert wind rattling the windows at that exact moment. The isolation settling around us like a suffocating blanket. Maybe part of me already knew. I wasn't just stepping into a job. I began reading the sheet. Rules for night shift attendant. 1. Greet every customer first. No matter what. Do not wait for them to speak. Do not go outside after 1 a.m. for any reason. If the radio speaks your name, change the station to static immediately. Do not look at reflections after midnight. Cover all reflective surfaces. If you hear knocking from the back door, ignore it. Do not answer. Keep all lights on. If one goes out, replace it immediately. If someone asks for pump 11, pretend we don't have one. Lock the register at 3:13 a.m. Do not open it again. Even if begged or threatened, I read them twice. By the third pass, my skin buzzed like static lived under it. There was no explanation, no safety context, no workplace rationale, just rules, strict and impossible to justify. I forced a laugh. Is this like a hazing thing? Harlan's eyes locked on mine. If you've ever seen someone who has lived too long with a fear they can't put down, you'd know the stare. It wasn't annoyance. It wasn't a joke, it was warning. It's life or death, he said. Follow them. Don't improvise. I wish I could say I took him seriously then, that I looked at those rules and believed them, that I had enough sense to walk out the door and keep driving until the desert emptied me out on the other side. But I stayed. I told myself it was old man superstition. Eccentric desert folklore, weird locals with quirky routines. I've met stranger people in far less lonely places. Harlan left without another word, just a nod, maybe a silent apology. When the sun began to sink, the desert changed. The heat died, but the air thickened, heavy with something electric, tense like a held breath just before a scream. The horizon burned orange and bruised purple, and the world outside the dusty glass darkened faster than it should have. I stood behind the counter with the laminated rules in my hands, watching the last strip of sunlight disappear, feeling like I'd stepped off the map and into somewhere forgotten by God and time alike. And right as the final light slipped beneath the dunes, a low hum rolled through the station walls, vibrating the glass, setting every hair on my body on edge. Night had come, and in that moment, in the suffocating dark, I realized something. The rules weren't strange. The desert was. I didn't know silence could feel heavy until I worked that first evening. There's a kind of quiet out here that doesn't just settle. It presses. A slow, tightening pressure behind the ribs, as if the desert itself is leaning in to listen to you breathe. The sun was gone. The empty highway stretched into a darkness so absolute it felt like the edge of the world. No headlights. No engine hum. Just the faint electric buzz of overhead lights and the soft clink of air conditioning coils cooling metal. I sat behind the counter, rolling the laminated rule sheet between my fingers, rereading each line. 8 rules. No context. No explanation. No reason beyond instinct and dread. Something about the way they were written bothered me. There were no employees must or corporate requires. No warnings about liability or OSHA guidelines. They read like ritual. Ancient, like instructions carved into cave stone passed down to keep something away, and then one line kept snagging my mind like a hooked tooth. Do not improvise. Why say it like that? Why not don't break rules or follow protocol? Why don't improvise? Improvisation implies consequence. It implies the system isn't just strict, it's exact. I set the sheet down, pulled it back, turned it over even though the back was blank. Some part of me kept expecting more rules to appear, like the paper was holding its breath too, waiting for me to slip. A buzzing sound snapped my attention upward, the flicker of the ceiling lights. Just one, a jerk of light, not a fade. I stared up, already glancing for the bulbs and switch locations, remembering rule number 6, keep all lights on. If one goes out, replace it immediately. It hadn't gone out though. Just flickered. But the rule didn't specify degrees of failure. It didn't say if it breaks, it said if one goes out. A tight knot formed in my stomach. A stupid, irrational fear pushing at me to grab a spare bulb just in case. Before I could move, the store radio crackled with static. I froze. It wasn't tuned to anything. I hadn't touched it. It had sat silent for nearly an hour. Now faint whispers sifted through, not words at first, more like throat sounds, dry and grinding, pushing through dust. The fine hairs along my arms lifted. Rule number 3 whispered through my head. If the radio speaks your name, change the station to static immediately. It hadn't said my name yet. Just noise. Desert wind through circuitry. Still, my hand slid toward the dial without thinking. Then, faint as breathing through cloth, the radio voice softened and coiled into shape. Hello? I jerked my hand back. It wasn't my name, but it was a greeting. Polite, curious, too human, too soft. The sound of someone pressing their lips to a microphone, intimate and close. I forced myself to speak to the empty room. It's just interference, I muttered. The radio answered. You came back. My pulse slammed so hard in my chest I felt it echo in my teeth. A sound escaped me, a half laugh, half choke. I switched the dial with a sharp twist, flipping the station to white static. The whisper cut off instantly, leaving only a harsh, comforting hiss. I exhaled. My heartbeat stung inside my ribs. I reached for the rule sheet again, gripping it like scripture. My eyes traced the lines, grounding myself. 8 rules. 8 lifelines. A sudden tapping sound made me jump, not a knock. Not fingernails. More delicate. A series of small rhythmic taps against the front glass. At first it sounded like insects, but it was too steady, too intentional. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause, tap. I moved slowly to the front window. The desert outside was a deep ocean of night. The pump canopy lights cast pale halos on empty concrete. Nothing moved. Then the tapping came again, directly beside my face against the glass. I flinched away so hard I nearly tripped over my own feet. My breath hitched and I pressed my back to the cigarette shelf. I scanned the windows. Every dark corner. Every edge. But if something was out there, it didn't want to be seen. Rule number 1. Greet every customer first. No matter what. Do not wait for them to speak. Was tapping a customer? Was the desert itself testing me? The tapping stopped, replaced by quiet so thick it swallowed the room. A thought crept into my head like an unwelcome whisper. It wants you to make a mistake. I didn't say hello. I didn't greet whatever was out there, and nothing punished me for breaking protocol, yet a sickness settled in my stomach. Rule number 1 suddenly felt less optional than the adrenaline told me. I returned to the counter and forced focus on the laminated sheet. I ran my finger along each rule again, slower this time, absorbing every curve of every letter like they were carved into my skin. That's when I noticed something odd, a faint handwritten note on the bottom corner. It hadn't been visible earlier. Thin pencil strokes, shaky, hurried. Don't trust Harlan after sunrise. I stared at it until my vision blurred. Did I miss it earlier? Or had the laminate always been smudged and scratched enough to hide it? A dry gust of desert wind hit the building, rattling the door. Shadows outside quivered across the parking lot. The neon sign flickered twice. The radio hissed with static like a restless breath. A shape moved outside, small, fast. I didn't see it, but I felt it. The sensation of motion, like weight shifting in the air, like something pacing the perimeter.
Something curious.
Something hungry. I pressed myself still, listening. Sand dragged across concrete. Not wind, something scraping. The faint crunch of footsteps. Too light to be human, too erratic to be normal. The tapping returned. This time at the side window further away. It moved, teasing, circling. I clenched my jaw, nails digging into my palms. Was it waiting for me to look? To open? To break the rules? The lights flickered again, a quick glitch that twisted my pulse into a knot. Rule number 6, keep all lights on. Every urge in me screamed to run, to turn off everything and hide in the back room until daylight or death, whichever found me first. But I swallowed it. I forced myself upright and marched to the supply shelf, pulling down a spare bulb with shaking hands. If one light died, I would be ready. The tapping stopped. Silence returned. And that silence felt like approval. As I walked back to the counter, cradling the bulb like a relic, a thought slithered through me. I wasn't alone. The gas station wasn't empty. The desert wasn't empty. The rules weren't superstition. They were a cage, a ritual to hold the night back, and I was the thing inside it now. I sat down and waited for the next sound. The next test, the next reminder that this job wasn't a job. It was survival. And the night had only just begun. The first hour of true night is the cruelest. That's what I believe now. After the sun disappears, the world doesn't immediately surrender to horror. It eases you in. It gives you a few minutes to pretend nothing is wrong. Enough time to make mistakes. That first night, I still held on to normalcy. I kept telling myself nothing supernatural could happen just because a laminated sheet warned me. Ghost stories, urban legends, desert cult superstition, all excuses I whispered to stay calm. But the desert has its own way of stripping comfort away. After the tapping faded, the gas station settled into stillness. No wind, no insects, not even the gentle hum of far-off traffic. It reminded me of the way funeral homes feel. Thick, sterile quiet, like the air doesn't dare disturb the dead resting there. I began restocking chip bags just to keep my hands busy. The crackle of plastic felt too loud. My heartbeat felt too loud. I checked the time. 11:17 p.m. Still hours until the supposed danger peak. Hours until 1 a.m., the rule about stepping outside. I kept glancing at the security monitors, expecting faces in the grainy cameras. Seeing nothing was worse. You don't realize how deeply your brain depends on background sound until it's gone. Silence becomes noise. It claws at you, makes you imagine footsteps, breathing, whispers. When the ice machine outside clunked suddenly, I almost dropped the bag of pretzels in my hand. The sound echoed through my bones. I turned to the front windows, squinting at the dim lights. The ice machine sat motionless, but the lid was slightly ajar now. I hadn't touched it. I knew I hadn't. Rule number 2 throbbed at the back of my skull. Do not go outside after 1 a.m. It wasn't 1 yet. But I stayed put anyway. Then the bell above the front door chimed, except the door didn't move. My throat closed. The bell swayed slightly as if touched by a passing breeze, but the air inside was still. I forced myself to speak, remembering rule number 1. Welcome. My voice cracked. The greeting hung in the air, pathetic and trembling. No reply. But the bell settled, sound dying too quickly, unnaturally fast, like something swallowed the echo. Then a figure approached from the darkness. I didn't see them arrive. They were just suddenly there, a silhouette on the far edge of the pump lights. Tall, thin, not moving. Head tilted as if listening, human shape, but frozen in a way real people never are, like a photograph left standing upright. A chill crawled up my spine so deep I felt it behind my teeth. Rule number 1 again, greet first. I had already done that. Had it heard? Did it count? The figure didn't come closer. It only stood, watching, waiting. Its posture was unnatural, too straight, neck craned just enough to suggest curiosity or hunger. I couldn't tell which. I swallowed and stepped back from the window, keeping it in sight. My legs felt filled with cement. A soft scraping sound came from behind me. I spun. The radio was rustling again, though it stayed on static. Whispering, rustling voices like the sound of hands brushing against a microphone. My name almost seemed to form inside the static. Or maybe my mind was eating itself alive with fear. I turned the volume down until only the faintest hiss remained. When I looked back, the figure outside was gone, no footsteps, no movement, just absence. I exhaled through clenched teeth, trying not to shake. I forced myself to keep working, straightening gum packets, wiping the counter, doing anything to maintain routine. Routine felt like the only shield I had. That's when the dust storm arrived. It came like a living thing. One moment the desert was still. The next, a roar of wind hit the building so violently the windows rattled in their frames. Dust spiraled in swirling vortexes under the pump canopy. Sand pelted the glass like hail. It wasn't just wind. It had rhythm, pulse, like breath. The lights flickered. Every instinct screamed at me to grab a bulb. My fingers dug into the rule sheet, knuckles white. Then I remembered something unsettling. I had no idea where the extra bulbs for the exterior lights were. Harlan had shown me where the indoor spares were, but the outdoor ones, he never mentioned them. Had he assumed I'd never need to replace them? Or had he simply hoped I wouldn't survive long enough to ask? I moved toward the storage closet anyway, driven by fear more than logic. The storm howled around the building, a deep, throaty sound that felt too alive to be weather. Somewhere in the wind, a voice whispered, not through the radio, outside, so faint I could barely separate it from the storm's breath. Come out. My skin crawled. Every hair stood up. Rule number 2 wasn't just instruction, it was prophecy. I backed away from the door, spine pressed to metal shelving. The door handle trembled. Not violently, gently, testing, almost polite in its persistence. I braced myself, ready to run, ready to hide. But the storm's voice faded as suddenly as it had appeared. The lights steadied. Silence rushed back like a tide. I raised shaking hands to my face and rubbed at the tension between my eyes. My lungs felt bruised from shallow breathing. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I nearly screamed. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out. One notification, no service, but the phone had activated voice to text accidentally. Words appeared on the screen, typed without sound, without my voice triggering them. Don't improvise. The same phrase Harlan had spoken. I dropped the phone on the counter like it had burned me. For the first time, I considered that maybe I shouldn't finish this shift. Maybe I should walk out, take my keys, and drive until dawn, even if the desert swallowed me on the way. But running is what brought me here. Running from life, from memory, from guilt. And running now felt like handing myself to whatever waited just outside. So I did the only thing I could. I stood still. I listened. The air conditioning kicked back on, a mundane hum. The fluorescent lights hummed. My heartbeat slowed just enough that I could hear actual silence again instead of panic's ringing roar. The desert outside remained motionless, as though the storm had never existed at all. I checked the clock again. Calendar, 59 p.m., 1 minute until midnight. 1 minute until the rules grew teeth. I lifted the laminated sheet with unsteady hands and whispered to myself, steady and quiet, as though reading a prayer in a dying church. Greet them first. Stay inside, static if it speaks. No reflections after midnight. Replace every bulb. Never say pump 11. Lock the register at 3:13 and don't open the back door. My voice felt smaller with each rule, like the list itself drained warmth from the air. Midnight struck. The world exhaled, and something in the darkness answered. Midnight doesn't fall here. It arrives the way a predator arrives, quietly, without warning, without mercy. The clock clicked to 12 IQ, and the hum of the building changed. Not stopped, changed. A subtle shift in frequency, like the air thickened, like the walls listened now. The difference between a room being empty and a room holding its breath. I didn't move for a full 10 seconds. I just stood there gripping the counter, pulse climbing into my throat, ears straining for sound. Any sound. Even the hum of a refrigerator compressor would have comforted me. Instead, I heard the desert exhale. A low, slow wind pushed across the sand, dragging grains across the windows like fingertips. A whisper of motion, soft but heavy. My ribs tightened around my lungs, breath trapped inside, and then the door chimed. The bell didn't ring. It chimed, long and melodic, like it was being pulled through honey. The sound stretched and warped in the air, too slow to be natural. Too heavy. And yet the door hadn't opened. I checked. My eyes snapped toward the glass before instinct caught up and dragged my gaze away. Remembering reflection, remembering rule number 4, I forced myself not to look too closely. I swallowed hard and did what rule number 1 required. Welcome, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Something moved in the corner of my eye. Shape before identity. A figure standing by the pump lights, half lit by the neon open sign. Tall, clean silhouette. A person, a man maybe, hat brim cutting across his forehead, suit jacket pressed and perfect in the middle of the desert, where nobody had business wearing one. A breeze lifted dust around him, but didn't move his clothes. He stepped forward, into the full glare of the canopy lamps, and I saw him clearly. Not pale, blanched. Every part of him seemed washed of life. Suit gray like ash, hat the same dusty color, eyes, not wrong but wrong enough. Dull like polished bone. He looked like he'd walked straight out of a sepia photograph and into the present. He moved slow, stiff, like a puppet pulled by strings of habit and hunger instead of muscle. When he turned fully toward me, I saw the thing that would haunt my dreams forever. His shadow didn't follow him, it crawled behind him with a delay. As he stopped, the shadow continued forward for another second, sliding like oil across concrete before snapping back to his heels with a jerk. Rule number 1 hammered in my skull. Greet every customer first. Do not wait for them to speak. I had already spoken, but fear twisted doubt into my spine. Did it count if he hadn't been inside yet? Did it count if he hadn't heard? Rules here didn't feel like suggestions. They felt like exact triggers. He reached the door, pulled it open. This time the bell didn't chime at all. My blood went ice cold. He walked in with steady steps. Not stomping, not dragging, just moving like gravity applied differently to him. The moment he crossed the threshold, the station lights flickered. Not like earlier. Like they wanted to extinguish themselves. like they didn't want to see him here. I steadied my voice. Evening. His head turned sharply toward me. Too sharp, too sudden, like something mimicking a movement rather than performing it. His face didn't move. No smile, no twitch, just stillness. Then slowly the corners of his mouth curled upward, too wide, stretching too much skin. The smile had no warmth. It wasn't even sinister. It was hungry in a polite way, the way a snake might smile if God gave it lips. "Lovely night," he said. The words came coated in dust, dry as tumbleweed bones. Politeness stretched thin over a voice that did not understand what polite meant. "Yes," I forced out. "Quiet out. Quiet." He repeated the word like he was tasting it. His jaw moved wrong, too mechanical. Quiet is good, he didn't blink. Didn't look around. Didn't examine the shelves like a real customer. He simply stood staring at me as if waiting for something, as if expecting me to break. My eyes flicked toward his shadow. It lagged again, a fraction of a second behind him. When he breathed, the shadow didn't. It just hung, suspended, then twitched. "What brings you out here?" I asked, forcing normalcy. Rules never said I had to talk, but silence felt dangerous. His head tilted slowly. Neck bones creaked like old wood. "Travel. To? Forward." That was all he said. Forward. As if direction and destination meant the same thing. I nodded, like that answer wasn't a nail through logic. "Need fuel?" He blinked finally, once painfully slow. "I do not take fuel." The room felt colder. The hum of the light stuttered again. Something deep in the vents hissed like a quiet warning. My hands twitched toward the radio dial, checking subconsciously that it was still static. His head turned, following the motion, eyes tracking the dial before returning to me. Very still. Very aware, I swallowed. Rule number 7 whispered across my thoughts. If someone asks for pump 11, pretend we don't have one. I prayed he wouldn't speak the number. He didn't. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, posture stiff but curious. "You are new?" "Yes." "New things are tempting." My skin crawled as though something invisible brushed the base of my neck. He smiled again, the same stretched skin smile. Consistency keeps the sand satisfied. New things disrupt consistency. My tongue felt glued in my mouth. "I'm just here to work. Follow instructions. Keep things running." He stared like he was measuring something inside me. "One hopes you keep things intact. The desert does not forgive improvisation." My chest tightened. He had used the same phrase as Harlan. The exact same. "Don't improvise." Before I could respond, he turned sharply and walked toward the door. His shoes didn't sound like rubber on tile. They sounded faintly like something dragging cloth across wood. At the doorway, he paused. Slowly, he lifted one hand, fingers dangling like marionette strings had been cut. His hand pointed toward the pumps. "If the lights flicker twice, stay behind the counter. If they flicker thrice, close your eyes." He stepped outside. The bell still made no sound. I stood frozen, watching, breathing too slow, too shallow. He walked into the darkness and dissolved. Not faded, but broke apart into dust that the wind did not carry. It simply fell into the earth. The pump canopy lights blinked once. I froze. They blinked again. 2 flickers. I moved fast, ducking behind the counter as if something invisible would strike me for hesitation. Silence held me like a hand around my throat. My lungs begged for breath. A 3rd flicker never came. I didn't stand again for almost a full minute. My heart beat too loud. My thoughts felt blurry, stretched thin. The laminated rule sheet sat on the counter like a holy text, glowing faintly under harsh fluorescent light. These were not rules to follow. They were rules to survive, and something, liked testing whether I would. The desert outside shifted again. Sand whispered across concrete. A far-off laugh and or wind distorted wrong brushed the glass. I clutched the rule sheet the way drowning men clutch rope. The night wasn't done. It hadn't even begun to starve yet. They say true silence drives people mad. I don't think that's correct. It isn't silence that destroys you. It's the moment after something unexplainable leaves when you brace for what comes next. That waiting, that trembling pause, that was the gas station now, thick, suspended, like the air refused to move until the next horror claimed its turn. I stayed crouched behind the counter long after the man with the wrong shadow dissolved into the desert. My legs tingled, blood prickling like needles under my skin. The laminated rule sheet dug into my palm, edges sharp enough to leave faint lines. Slowly, cautiously, I rose. My knees shook, knocking together once. I pressed my fingertips to the countertop to steady myself. The lights above buzzed, steady but strained, like they worked harder just to stay alive. I checked the clock. I'm only 23 minutes past midnight. It already felt like I'd been awake in this nightmare for years. When the radio hiss deepened, I flinched. At first I thought it was just static shifting, the desert wind playing tricks. But then the tone shifted, low, husked, like something clearing a throat. Then came the sound of lips parting. A whisper pushed through the speaker, intimate and wrong. "Hey," I froze. My tongue glued itself to the roof of my mouth. The rule echoed like a heartbeat inside my skull. If the radio speaks your name, change the station to static immediately. It hadn't said my name this time, just a casual whisper, as though someone stood inches from my ear. A tone you'd use with an old friend. "Or pray, you awake?" My pulse thrashed. I didn't answer. I waited. The shadows seemed to listen with me. Dust skittered across the floor like tiny feet trying not to be heard. It's so quiet out there. A soft laugh, breathless, hungry, makes you feel alone, doesn't it? I reached for the dial, fingertips trembling. The voice stopped abruptly. Then it said my name. Exactly the way my mother used to say it. Gentle, warm, loving. A memory-made sound. A knife disguised as comfort, every muscle locked. My lungs stopped. The rule screamed in my head. I twisted the dial to static so fast I nearly snapped it off. White noise exploded into the room like a tidal wave. Relief and terror tangled inside me. Then something scratched the outside of the window. A slow drag of nail or claw across glass. I didn't look. I refused to look. Some instinct deeper than fear told me curiosity here wasn't innocent. It was bait. The scratch paused. Then came again. Lower this time, like whatever was outside tested exactly where my attention was. I gripped the counter so tight my knuckles whitened. The static began to distort, stretching, dipping into low growls, rising into whines. I slammed the volume down, refusing to yank the dial again, afraid the radio itself might punish disobedience. Silence. No, near silence, flooded back. My heartbeat filled the space like a frantic drum. Something moved outside, footsteps or the drag of something heavy. Then 3 taps, against the door. Not the frantic knocks from horror. Movies. Polite, slow, civilized. 3. Gentle reminders that something waited. I didn't speak. Rule number 1, greet every customer. Didn't apply unless the bell chimed. I clung to that technicality like a lifeline. The tap stopped. Seconds stretched into long, static-filled moments. Then a voice, not from the radio this time, from outside. Muffled through glass, cold out here. Not begging, just stating fact. A chill crawled up my spine. The handle on the door twitched. Once. Then twice. Like someone testing it, seeing if I'd forgotten to lock it. But I had. I checked earlier, twice. I forced myself to stay still. The handle fell still again. The presence, whatever shape it wore, when it withdrew, for a moment. Then the radio whispered again, despite being turned down, almost silent. Let me in. Not my mother's voice anymore. Not even human. There was a scrape, a rattle, the sound of teeth behind the words. I didn't breathe. I didn't dare blink. The static swallowed the whisper again, thank God. I found myself whispering, not to the voice, but to the walls, to the buzzing ceiling, to whatever old god of lonely places might listen. You can't come in. I won't let you. The building creaked as though it heard me. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear slid across my jaw and fell to the counter. Not sobbing, silent tears leaking like fear had punctured me. I wiped my eyes, anger flaring through dread. I forced air into my lungs. I would not fall apart, not yet, not while night still held hours to burn me. I scanned the interior. Camera feeds, storage closet, bathroom door closed, mirrors covered, bulbs glowing steady. I repeated the rules under my breath like a prayer. Each word steadied me, anchored me to something real even as reality blurred at the edges. Then, footsteps. But these weren't outside. They came from the roof. Slow. Deliberate. Each one thudding like someone dragging weight, pacing from one end of the building to the other. A cold spike of terror shot through me. My heart stuttered. Nothing in the rules mentioned the roof. No guidance. No instruction. And suddenly I understood the unspoken 9th rule. Do not ask questions the rules don't answer. I curled into myself, fighting the instinct to look up, to see what walked above me. Curiosity was death here. I felt that truth like a knife against my throat. Then something creaked, metal warping, the roof denting inward, dust falling from the ceiling tiles. I pressed myself against the back wall, silent, clenching the rule sheet so hard the laminate cracked. My breath came shallow, nose burning. After 3 steps, the weight moved away, toward the edge of the roof. Then it hopped down, a heavy thump outside the building shaking the glass. Silence seeped in again. Claustrophobic, expectant. When the radio hissed, I nearly screamed. Not words this time. Not a voice. Just breathing, soft, steady, human breathing. The kind of sound someone makes when standing right behind you. Goosebumps crawled up my neck. I refused to turn. I knew if I looked, the breathing would have a shape, and I wasn't ready to know what shape. Nightmares took here. I turned the radio off completely. This time, twisting the knob, until the click sealed the room in true quiet. Seconds passed. Then minutes. My nerves buzzed until they hurt under my skin. The clock read 12:48 a.m. still. More than an hour until 1 yarn still. Eternity until dawn. Still. Rules left to keep or die breaking, I whispered. To myself, not courage, not strength. Just the truth in trembling breath. I will survive tonight. I will. And something outside the glass laughed. Soft. Patient, as though it agreed. There are moments even in terror where instinct whispers clarity into your ear. Moments where your body knows before your mind catches up. That was me, staring at the silent radio, feeling something shift in the air, subtle and cold, like a phantom fingertip drawing a line down my spine. And then the clock turned. 59. 1 minute until the reflection rule activated. I had forgotten. God help me in all the fear and noise and voices I had forgotten. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was falling. My eyes darted around the store. Windows, cooler doors, the chrome coffee maker, vending machine glass, the bathroom mirror behind the door. I hadn't covered everything. I hadn't prepared. Rule number 4 pulsed like a living thing in my brain. Do not look at your reflection after midnight. Cover all reflective surfaces. I grabbed the box of brown paper bags from under the counter, ripping them open with shaking hands. My breath came fast, ragged like I was being hunted. Maybe I was. Tape. Where was the tape? I swore under my breath, scanning shelves. There, by the register. I snatched it, tearing strips faster than my fingers could place them. Bag, tape. I slapped coverings on the polished coffee machine panel, on the candy counter glass. My heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning thought. Each second felt like a grain of sand sliding too fast through an hourglass I didn't control. Then a sound cut through the silence, a soft click. The bathroom door, settling. Or moving, on its hinges. It had been shut earlier. I was sure of it. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. But the door now stood cracked open just enough for darkness to breathe from the gap. My skin prickled. My throat tightened around invisible fingers. The bathroom mirror was uncovered. The lights inside were off. Anything could be in there. Nothing could be in there. Either option threatened to break me. Close it, I whispered to myself. Just close it, don't look. But fear is a puppeteer. It plays your bones like strings. I stepped forward. The floor creaked under my weight. Dust settled in the air like falling ash. Every instinct screamed at me to run, hide, pray, but I kept walking. I had to shut that door. The darkness in the bathroom was not natural. It didn't look like shadow. It looked like the absence of light, a hole cut in the world. My fingers brushed the door, and then I heard it. A faint whisper inside. My voice. Soft. Trembling. Mirroring me. Don't go. I bit down so hard on my own tongue I tasted copper. My knees nearly buckled. My shoulder hit the wall. My reflection was in there. It was awake. It was talking. Rule number 4 wasn't superstition, it was containment. I forced the door shut, shoving my weight against it until the latch clicked. I slapped tape across the seam like it could hold back hell itself. My vision blurred, breath ripping in and out of my lungs. Just then, a flicker in the cooler glass across the aisle. No, not a flicker, a face. Mine, but the eyes weren't mine. They were wider, smiling, begging. It pressed against the inside of the glass like frozen breath fogging the window. Only instead of fog, it left streaks like greasy fingerprints sliding down. I stumbled back, slamming into the shelf. Chips rattled. Candy bars clattered. My reflection followed every movement with eager hunger. "Let me out," it mouthed. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't need to. Every syllable carved into my bones like a scalpel. I tore bags and tape and covered the cooler door without looking again. My field of vision shrank to the brown paper, the tape, my trembling hands. I did not permit myself to see the glass. When I stepped back, there was one reflection left. A tiny chrome strip on the register, and I saw something there. Not myself. Something leaning over my shoulder. Something tall, thin, its head cocked. Its teeth too many, too sharp. Its smile stretching as I stared. Pain jolted through me, instinct snapping me away. I slapped a receipt roll over the strip, breathing like I'd outrun a bullet. Silence dropped again, but it was wrong. Silence. Heavy, breathing, watching. I stood still until my muscles burned. I didn't dare turn around. If I did and nothing was there, I could pretend safety. If I did and something was there. No, I didn't move. Seconds crawled like insects across skin. My pulse thudded loud enough to tremble through my limbs. Then slowly, the pressure lifted. Whatever reflection mimicry had awakened sank back but not defeated, waiting, watching from the other side of glass and metal and sanity. My breath finally left me in a broken rush. I sagged against the shelf. Then, just to remind me nothing was over, the store lights flickered once, twice. I ran to the breaker closet, yanking the door open to check fuses like that mattered, like human logic applied here. I braced for a third flicker. None came. I slid to the floor, back against the wall, dizzy with adrenaline and terror. Paper bags and tape dangled from my fingers like shed skin. The rule sheet rustled where it lay on the counter, as if stirred by breath that wasn't mine. As if amused, my voice, raw, cracked, broke the silence. "I'm still here." The store didn't answer, but I swear the paper smiled. Only then did I notice my phone vibrate in my pocket. A new text, no number, no mirrors where we come from. I dropped it like it burned. Then the clock clicked to 1 a.m. and everything changed again. 1 a.m. arrived without grace. No chime, no subtle shift. Just a silent snap in reality. Like the desert itself blinked, the air grew heavier. Not colder, heavier, like sound thickened, like gravity deepened around me. Every object in the store felt outlined in tension, like it had awareness, like it waited to see whether I'd obey or break. Rule number 2 whispered in my skull like a living voice: do not go outside after 1 a.m. for any reason. Before midnight, the station felt like a lonely outpost. After midnight, it felt like an altar. At 1 a.m., it became a cage. The pump canopy lights flickered again. Once, twice, stopped. I locked my knees to keep from collapsing. My mouth was dry. My heart beat too loudly for my ears. I felt it in my teeth. Then, the first sound, not footsteps, not tapping. Breathing, outside. Against the glass. Slow. Deep. Wet. The sound of lungs dragging air through something unnatural, like lungs filled with thick swamp water instead of night air. Each inhale sounded sticky, each exhale carrying a faint wet hiss. My stomach twisted. I refused to turn toward the windows. I stared straight ahead, frozen, hands flat on the counter. I listened. The breathing dragged along the storefront, moving from one window to the next. I imagined a shape tracing the glass with its forehead, trying to remember what warmth felt like. The sound stopped in front of the locked door. Silence. Then the handle rotated. Slow, casual testing. It clicked once, again. Then the door shook violently, just once. Like something impatient realized force didn't matter here. A low growl hummed through the foundation. The lights trembled overhead. I didn't breathe. The handle eased back into place. Quiet returned. Brittle, strained, unnatural. I slowly sank behind the counter, crouching with my back against the mini fridge. I gripped the floor like the tile itself could anchor me, but the danger outside wasn't everything. Something else moved inside. A faint scrape behind the candy shelf. Like fingernails dragging lightly over cardboard. I held my breath again. The scrape repeated and then stopped. Then a different sound, soft fabric shifting, like someone leaning against a shelf to steady themselves. I clenched my jaw to keep from screaming. Something was in the aisles. I stayed perfectly still, barely daring to blink. Dust fell from a ceiling vent, slow, deliberate grains hitting tile one by one, as if shaken loose by something unseen passing near it. The radio crackled again, even though I'd turned it off. A sigh, miserable, tired, leaked out of the speaker, followed by an almost pleading voice. Don't leave me. Not a command. A sadness. A resignation. Like someone on the other side of a door, begging not to be abandoned. I didn't move. The voice shifted into a whisper like a breeze through wheat. You will be lonely too. That stung more than any monster could. Loneliness is a familiar ache. It clings the way desert dust clings to your clothes. I thought of the life I'd left behind. The mistakes. The silence after arguments that never got resolved. The empty space where people used to be. I wondered, stupidly, if the desert could smell loneliness. If that's why it found me. The lights buzzed. A low hum crawled under the counter. For a moment I thought something was beneath me. Hands pressing up through tile, fingers seeking weak points. But it was just the power grid humming, strained and alive. A faint tapping on glass snapped my attention to the front again. Not violent now, rhythmic, almost polite. Tap, tap, tap. A pause, then a voice, clear as if pressed right against the window. Let me warm up in there. The tone was wrong. Not threatening, hopeful. Gentle in a way that cracked against dread like a broken lullaby. The perfect voice to trigger pity. To trick mercy, I didn't move. The tapping changed rhythm. Faster now. Impatient. Something outside dragged its hand or its face like along the glass with a heavy smear. My stomach churned. Then 3 heavy knocks sounded on the back door. Knuckles or bone or something harder hitting metal. A voice. Different this time. Angrier growled through the steel. Open it. Rule number 8 screamed in my skull. If you hear knocking at the back door, do not answer. No matter what, my breath came short and shallow. I clamped a hand over my mouth until my lungs ached. The knocking grew sharper. More frantic. Something thudded against the door once, twice, like a shoulder being thrown. But there was no dent. No warping metal. Whatever hit it didn't aim to break in. It aimed to make me break. It stopped suddenly. Silence again. Suffocating. Then a whisper bled through the door seam, low, hateful, guttural. We know you're alone. I nearly sobbed. My knees buckled. I let myself slide down the wall, trembling until my teeth faintly clicked together. Outside, something trotted across the roof. Faster than before. Clawed feet scratching old shingles, pacing above me like a wolf circling weak prey. Then, the soft click of a camera speaker powering. I whipped my head toward the security monitor. All screens were static, except one. Camera number 4, the rear alley view. Something stood behind the building, tall, wrong in proportion, too long in limb, skin stretched thin like it wanted to tear. It didn't face the camera, not at first. It faced the exit door I was forbidden to open. Then slowly, impossibly, its head turned toward the camera. No facial features, just shifting texture. Like flesh remembering how to be human. It tapped the metal door once with a claw-like finger. Then pointed at the camera, like it knew I was watching, like it wanted me to see. My body locked. When it bent its head sideways, slow, listening for movement inside the store, my heartbeat felt loud enough to betray me. Then it vanished. Not stepped away, vanished. Like the desert swallowed it. The camera blinked to static. I curled forward, hands shaking, head pressed to my knees. I'm still here, I whispered into my sleeves, echoing the moment hours ago when belief still existed. Something outside whispered back in my exact tone, my exact words. Still here. I didn't lift my head. I understood the rule now. Night was not time passing here. Night was a presence. Watching. Waiting. Circling. Hungry. And I still had 5 more hours to survive. When terror stretches long enough, it becomes a second skin. It wraps around you, presses against your ribs, and breathes when you breathe. By the time the backdoor incident began, I wasn't panicking anymore. I was sinking. Quiet dread, thick and suffocating, clung to me like desert heat you can't sweat out. The clock read 1:41 a.m. Time here didn't pass like normal. It lurched, stopped, restarted when it wanted to. I kept glancing at the second hand just to confirm reality hadn't frozen entirely. Each tick felt unnatural, like time moved because something forced it to. I sat on the floor behind the counter, knees pulled up, rule sheet clenched in both hands. I repeated them silently so my mind couldn't wander into fear's deeper rooms. Greet first. Stay inside. Static. No reflections. Lights on. No pump 11. Lock the register. Don't open the back door. The last one crawled across my thoughts like a centipede. Don't open the back door. At some point the air changed. Thickened again. Not the suffocating density from before. This was subtler. Like humidity but dry. Like the desert inhaled and held the breath. Then I heard it. A footstep on sand. Soft. Deliberate. Close. Not pacing this time. Not circling. Approaching. I held my breath. Listening. Another step. Closer. Sand grain shifting under weight. Not human weight. Something heavier dragging itself slightly. A scrape at the back wall. A sound like fingers trailing across stucco. Then a knock, not polite. Not tapping. A single heavy knock that made dust fall from the ceiling vent. The building answered the impact like it felt pain. My blood stopped moving. My fingers tightened on the laminate until it creaked. 5 seconds passed, another knock. Same weight, same patience. Not frantic. Measured as though the thing behind the door had all the time in the world. Then a voice. My brother's voice. Hey, it's me. My lungs twisted. For a heartbeat, I forgot where I was. I forgot rules, dread, dessert. I was a child again in a messy living room. My brother calling me from the kitchen for dinner. Reality slammed back like a whip. He did not know I worked here. He did not know where I was. That voice didn't belong to anyone who loved me. I said nothing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The voice came again, slightly amused as if it felt my hesitation. Come on, open up. It's cold as hell out here. I clenched my jaw so tight something in my neck popped. Silence. Then the voice changed. Same tone, same cadence. But wrong, like someone wearing his voice like a badly fitted coat. Why aren't you answering? I pressed my forehead to my knees. The laminate rule sheet dug into my scalp. Another knock, louder. Then something scraped under the door. Something thin and long slid across tile, not a finger, not anything human. Like a jointed stick clicking faintly as it moved. It traced a path along the floor, searching, testing. It stopped by my shoe. I did not move. I couldn't. The voice shifted again, tone flattening. Emotion stripped away like skin peeled from bone. Let me in. Rule number 8 screamed silent fire through my veins. No matter what. Do not open the back door. I'm not falling for this. I whispered to myself. Quiet, barely breath. The thing outside didn't like that. It slammed a fist or something against the door so hard the whole station trembled. The vending machine rattled. A shelf clinked with glass bottles shivering against each other. A low growl vibrated through the frame. Animal. But not any animal that belonged to the world. I knew then, horribly, and Narration laughed, not loudly. A soft chuckle like someone telling a private joke. The kind of laugh a stranger gives you when they already know how you'll die. It whispered softer. Too close to the crack under the door. Breath seeping into the room like cold fog. You will open it eventually, the scraping. Withdrew. Slow. Caressing the tile as if dragging. Claws or bone across it lovingly. The presence lingered on the other side. Waiting. Listening. For breath. I didn't give it one. Minutes passed. My muscles trembled from holding still. My chest burned. When I finally inhaled, I did it so slowly it hurt. The building settled, a quiet groan beneath the concrete. The desert wind returned in gentle sweeps, as if pretending nothing touched this place, as if the night itself wanted to lull me into forgetting. I lifted my head. My eyes burned with unshed tears. Fear no longer felt sharp, it felt ancient, heavy. Something in the air hinted that if I survived, I wouldn't return to who I was. The desert sands had seen me now, named me, marked me. A sound echoed and a faint gravel crunch. Lighter footsteps now, trailing off away from the building. The thing moved on, or pretended to. I dared a single shaky breath, then, faint but clear, "See you soon." Not from outside, from the radio speaker, whispered as if spoken directly into my ear. I slapped my hand over my mouth, biting down to stop the sound rising from my throat. A sob, a scream. I'm still not sure which. I checked the clock, Fulmor, still hours to go, still rules to follow, still a desert full of hungry things waiting for one mistake. My voice cracked into the quiet. Just a breath of a whisper. I won't open it. The rule sheet rustled on its own, like something unseen stroked the laminate in dark approval or dark anticipation. The thing beyond the back door left or pretended to leave, but the emptiness it left behind was not relief. It was space for something worse. Fear is rarely a single visitor. It comes in waves like the desert wind, each gust grinding your nerves thinner. I knew the next one was coming. I felt it before I heard anything. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt expectant. I peeled myself off the floor, every joint cracking, muscles shaking like I'd been holding my body together with sheer will. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady but tired, like they were fighting to stay aware too. A light bulb on aisle 3 buzzed louder than the rest, flickering at the edges of vision. I focused on the register instead. Something solid. Something normal. I stared at the laminated rules like they were scripture, grounding myself in each sentence. Then the pump light outside flickered. Just a heartbeat. A dip in brightness so subtle I thought exhaustion imagined it, until I saw the shadow. It wasn't a passing cloud, and there were no clouds. The night sky outside was clear, pinpricked with stars too sharp and too many. No moon. Nothing to cast that shadow. Except him. The man in the ash-gray suit. He stood beneath the pump canopy again, back turned to me this time, head tilted slightly upward like he was smelling the air. His silhouette was perfectly still, hands clasped loosely behind him like a gentleman waiting for a train. The suit looked cleaner than before, like the desert had polished him instead of wearing him down. I swallowed so hard it hurt. My lips parted, a breath, a sound, but I caught myself. Rule number 1, greet every customer first, but he wasn't inside. Yet I stayed absolutely silent, watching. My pulse beat in my throat. He turned slowly, as though rotating on a hinge instead of bone, until his face pointed toward the window. And then he took one step forward. The nearest pump light died instantly. It didn't flicker. It died, plunging half the canopy into blackness. The faint hum of electricity choked. The darkness around him quivered like heat mirage reversed, cold instead of warm. He took another step. Another pump light died. I didn't realize. I had stepped backward until my heel hit the bottom shelf behind the counter. Something, adrenaline, instinct, terror, urged me to run to the breaker closet again. But logic whispered a warning. Light does not fail here by accident. Light fails as surrender. If I moved, if I broke the fragile ritual of stillness, I feared something else would flicker out. Me. The suited man reached the glass door. He didn't open it this time. He simply stood there, staring in, waiting. I forced my voice, shaky but clear. Welcome. His lips stretched slowly into that unnatural, thin smile, polite and predatory in equal measure. Something about it told me smiling was not his nature. It was mimicry, a human gesture learned secondhand. He didn't move at first, just basked in the words like my greeting validated him, like I had invited him into a home I didn't know I owned. Then he lifted his hand, slowly, and pressed his palm against the glass. The surface fogged around it even though the night was warm. His skin was cold enough to frost. His shadow lagged a second behind his motion, then caught up violently, slapping onto the floor like a body hitting pavement. The glass vibrated. I inhaled through clenched teeth. "You've learned quickly," he murmured, voice muffled slightly but unmistakably close. "Most break by now." I said nothing. Silence felt safer than curiosity, safer than fear. He tilted his head, smile widening like someone stretching leather. "Not brave," he said softly. "Just obedient." Obedience here wasn't virtue. It was survival. Instinct told me to keep my face blank, to show nothing, but he saw it anyway. "I smell doubt," he whispered. His hand slid downward, fingers leaving streaks on the glass like frost residue melting into a smear. When his fingertip reached the bottom of the door, he froze suddenly. The smile disappeared. His face went slack. The air stiffened like something unseen had entered beside him. "I am not alone tonight," he said quietly. "Not a threat. A revelation." His eyes, dull and bone hollow, lifted slightly to the right, like he was watching something outside the frame of my world. A second later, a shape moved behind him. I didn't see it clearly. I saw only movement. A slither in the shadows, a ripple like dark cloth dragging across sand. The outline of something tall, too thin to be human, bent at wrong angles. Its presence distorted the pump light behind it. The man in the suit stiffened. He wasn't afraid. He simply acknowledged existence. "It grows hungry," he said softly. "Rhythms break soon." My throat tightened. "What rhythms?" He turned his head toward me again. His eyes weren't just dull now, they were hollow, like someone had scooped the soul out of them. The ones that keep it fed. He stepped back, not walked, slid backward without bending a joint. The pumps behind him flickered back on one by one, like his departure gave permission for electricity to breathe again. Before he melted into the desert dark, he spoke one last time. "When lights fall, kneel," and then he was gone. The world held still. My pulse thundered.
"Neil, was that a rule?"
"A test? A trap?" Panic pressed through my veins like poison. My mind burned with questions it was not allowed to ask, and that's when the back door clicked. One slow, soft click, like a child carefully turning. A knob to avoid noise. I did not move. The click came. Again. Louder. A twist of metal that tried to mimic patience, but couldn't hide hunger. The lock held. A voice seeped from the seam. Not my brother's this time. Not human at all. A choked gargle of dirt and breath forced through a throat that wasn't made for speaking. Soon, my hands shook. I held the rule sheet like a lifeline, whispering the lines again and again. I didn't remember choosing to speak. It came from survival instinct deeper than thought. Then, from the radio, low and quiet, the suited man's voice returned. Though he hadn't touched the radio. No improvisation. Static flooded the speaker. The clock read 2:27 a.m. 2 hours of night felt like 2 lifetimes. I had become a creature of rules and breath and shaking hands. The desert outside pressed against the walls like a tidal wave of teeth waiting for cracks. I forced myself to inhale, and exhale, and remain still. This place was not haunted. It was governed, and something ancient was watching to see if I could follow its laws long enough to deserve dawn. There's a point where fear stops screaming and starts whispering. It wraps around your spine like a vine and squeezes until your nerves go numb. By the time the suited man vanished, and the thing at the back door fell silent, I understood something cruel and simple. Terror here wasn't a spike, it was a tide, and the tide was still rising. I stayed crouched behind the counter, gripping the rule sheet, whispering the lines like sacrament. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, thin, frayed, vibrating with exhaustion. When the front doorbell chimed, the sound was almost gentle, almost the kind of sound that's been normal your whole life and until now. Now it felt like a blade sliding between ribs. My heart lurched, my body locked. I didn't choose to stand, and no, instinct dragged me upright like a puppet jerked by strings. Rule number 1 seared across my mind. Greet every customer first. I forced air into my lungs. "Welcome," I said, voice cracking in the middle, tongue thick and dry. Silence followed. No footsteps. No movement. Just the hum of the lights and the faint rattle of the AC like it was struggling to breathe too. I leaned just enough to see down the aisle. Nobody. But the bell had chimed. Someone, something, was here. A rustle came from the snack aisle, a bag crinkling soft but deliberate. Something brushed the shelf. Then footsteps, soft dragging, moved across the tile. Like bare feet, or something that had forgotten how feet worked. A cold weight settled on my chest. Rule number 1 didn't say they had to answer. It only said I had to greet them first. If they existed enough to enter, the rule bound me. I stayed still, breathing shallow, listening. A can thudded off a shelf. Rolled. Stopped suddenly, not by physics, but as if pressed down by a hand. Or a foot. Or something neither. The radio hissed faintly. Not voices, just anticipation, like the static was waiting to see what I'd do. Waiting to judge. My hands trembled on the counter edge. Then came a whisper, not through the radio, not outside. Directly from the aisle, a child's voice. "Where's Mom?" My blood iced. No child lived within 100 miles of here. No family stopped at this place at night. No one sane would bring their kid to a ghosted highway in a desert that didn't forgive mistakes. I didn't turn. I didn't move. I didn't answer, because the rules didn't tell me to. The air thickened. The voice came again, closer now, soft, innocent, or pretending. "Have you seen her? She was right behind me." Something like crying, thin and practiced, echoed through the shelves. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted iron. Pain kept me grounded. A shadow moved at the end of the aisle, low, trembling. Like small shoulders, like shaking hair, like the outline of a child, except shadows didn't pulse like that. Didn't stutter like corrupted footage. I squeezed my eyes shut for one heartbeat, then forced them open. Stay aware. Stay alive. Something brushed the counter near my hand. A fingertip, a nail, cold, dry, curious. I yanked my hand back. A soft whisper followed. Right behind my ear, close enough to feel cold breath trace my neck. "Don't hide." I jerked, hand flying instinctively toward the emergency flashlight under the counter. The rules didn't say I couldn't grab it. The rules didn't forbid light. Before I touched it, something giggled from the back of the store. Not a child giggle. Wrong pitch, wrong rhythm, like it hadn't used laughter in a long time and dragged. The sound out of memory. The lights overhead flickered. Once I froze, kneeling. Hands, hovering above the drawer where the flashlight sat. Twice. Rule. I never wanted to test, and the suited man's warning roared in my mind. If they flicker twice, stay behind the counter. I stayed low, spine curved, head down. The third flicker never came. Instead, the bell chimed again, but different. Higher pitch, sharp, like metal struck wrong. Footsteps shuffled toward the door. Soft but urgent. Something scraped across tile. Dragging, limping, trying to be human but forgetting which leg moved first. Then silence. I dared peek over the counter. The glass door reflected only darkness outside. No shape, no figure. But a small handprint smeared the glass. Too small, smeared downward like whatever touched it didn't know how fingers worked. My stomach twisted. I exhaled, shaking so hard I heard my teeth click. The store felt emptier now, but not safer. Like the presence hadn't left. Like it simply moved just out of sight. I wiped my palms on my pants. Sweat and dust and fear stuck to skin like glue. Then, as if to mock me, the door chimed again. This time there was a person, a man in work overalls, grease-stained, sunburned neck. Boots scraping tile. He walked in, shoulders hunched like he'd worked 12 hours straight under the sun. I didn't hesitate. "Welcome," I said, breathless but clear. He didn't look at me right away. He moved slow to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of soda, uncapped it, took a drink. The normalcy was surreal enough to feel violent. He turned finally and smiled. A real smile. Tired. Friendly enough. For half a second, my brain believed in comfort again. Then I saw his reflection in the cooler door behind him. It didn't move like he did. It lagged. It stared at me with eyes too wide. Then it grinned. Too many teeth, as his real face stayed relaxed. My vision tunneled. My throat closed. But he spoke first, casual as dust. "Quiet night?" I didn't speak. Couldn't. He noticed the silence or pretended to, then tipped his head in polite nod and walked out. The bell chimed. He stepped into the desert, boots crunching sand. His reflection? Wrong. Hungry. Stayed one heartbeat longer, pressed to the cooler glass. grinning like it had tasted my fear and found it delicious. Then it smeared away like fog, vanishing only after the man disappeared. Into dark. The pumps returned to steady hum. The lights steadied. Normal. Returned like a lie. My breath trembled out of me. Not all who come in at night are predators. Some are bait, some are watchers, some are echoes of themselves, and some are human shapes stuffed with something else entirely. The rule sheet lay beside me, edges curling from sweat and grip. This place wasn't testing my courage. It was training me, preparing me, breaking me in like a new dog learns the leash. The gas station wasn't sanctuary. It wasn't trap, it was threshold, and tonight I wasn't alone in crossing it. Terror doesn't always arrive with claws and teeth. Sometimes it slips in quietly, through the smallest crack, an overlooked detail, a lapse in vigilance, a human moment in a place where humanity is poison. I had been holding myself together for hours, clinging to rules like lifelines. But fear erodes discipline the way wind carves stone. All it takes is one moment of weakness, and weakness in this place feeds something eager. It started with exhaustion. Not panic, not adrenaline. Just the slow, creeping weight of survival stretching too long. My knees ached. My eyelids dragged like sandbags. Every exhale trembled with fatigue. Humans aren't built to fight invisible nightmares alone in fluorescent light. Eventually, the body rebels. I blinked too long. That was my crime. Not sleep. Not collapse. Just one slow blink that lasted a beat longer than it should. When I opened my eyes again, the world hadn't changed. But something in the reflection had. I didn't realize it at first. I only noticed the familiar hum of the refrigerators and the faint rattle of a candy wrapper settling somewhere. The stillness felt almost comforting. Too comforting. The gas station was never truly still at night, and then a soft tap. Not on the window this time. On glass inches from me, my heart jumped. The cooler door beside the counter, the one I thought I'd covered, held a sliver of exposed reflective surface near the hinge. Barely an inch wide, barely enough to catch light, barely enough for something to look back at me. My reflection stared out, but it didn't blink. Its mouth parted in a small O of surprise, like it hadn't expected me to wake. Like it had been waiting for me to drift further, to slip deeper, to let go fully. It smiled, slow, spreading, gleeful in its malice. "No," I whispered, breath shaking. The reflection mouthed the word toe, then shook its head. Eyes widening, grin stretching wider than skin should allow, cheek splitting slightly at the corners as if it had to tear itself open to mimic joy. I stumbled backward so fast my shoulder slammed into a shelf. A can fell, rolling across the tiles like distant thunder. My hand shot out for the covering. Paper for anything. But instinct froze me. First because the reflection wasn't just looking, it leaned, its head pressed, against the thin reflective strip like a child pressing a face to glass. Nose flattening. Forehead smearing. Except it wasn't confined to my face anymore. It wasn't copying my posture. It was pressing from the inside, pushing through like the mirror was only paper. "Stop," I hissed, voice cracking. Not a command, a plea. Its eyes glowed faintly, sick pale light like moon through fog. It whispered against the glass, lips moving with forced slowness. I didn't hear sound, but I didn't need to. I knew the words. Let me in. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. Rule number 4 rose in my mind like a scream. Do not look at your reflection after midnight. Cover all reflective surfaces. I had looked. I had failed. The rule sheet in my fist felt suddenly thin, flimsy, like it couldn't protect me anymore. Not for myself. The reflection's hand lifted, palm sliding across the inside of the glass, leaving streaks like oil and ash. Its fingers tapered long, too long, joints bending wrong, almost double in number. It wasn't my hand anymore. It wasn't me anymore. I reached out, not to touch it, but to cover it, and the reflection reacted violently. Its face slammed against the mirror strip with a wet, meaty sound, teeth grinding against the invisible barrier, jaw distending as if it wanted to bite its way through. I choked on a sound, part scream, part breath, then it spoke, not aloud. Not through air, but inside my skull, vibrating bone. You blinked. I bit my lip until blood hit my tongue. Pain anchored me. I slapped a paper bag over the strip and taped it down in one frantic motion. Hand shaking so violently the tape tore twice. When it sealed, I stumbled back, eyes watering, lungs raw. Silence, no tapping, no whispering, no breathing that wasn't mine. But something remained, a pressure. Like fingers still pressed the other side of a wall. Like a face lingered inches away in darkness, waiting for the paper to tear, waiting for my next mistake. My pulse thudded loud enough to blur sound. I sagged against the counter, limbs trembling as though I'd run miles. Then, from the bathroom, the mirror, I taped earlier, a soft knock. Not from outside the door, from inside the mirror. A sound like knuckles tapping glass underwater. Slow, curious, patient. I didn't move. Glass strained in its frame, groaning faintly. Something shifted behind it, pressing outward, testing weak spots with gentle persistence. It sounded like someone dragging a hand along the inside of a coffin, waiting for wood to crack. I stepped backward until my spine hit the cigarette rack. If the mirror broke, if it came through, if the reflection bled into reality, there would be no rule to save me, I whispered, shaking. I covered it. "You can't come out?" The reply came as a hairline crack and a faint tick, like ice splitting on a frozen lake. Then silence again. I crouched, bracing against the floor, arms hugging knees. I didn't dare look at another surface, not even my phone. Especially not my phone. Anything that could reflect was a doorway, a mouth, a trap. Fear wasn't sharp now. It was hollowing, carving me like sand shapes do. Survival was no longer willpower. It was instinct. Animal-like. Primal. I murmured the rules again, voice raw, greet first. Stay inside, static, no reflections. Lights on, no pump 11. Lock the register. Don't open the back door. My voice cracked on the fourth one. No reflections. I looked at the clock and afraid even glass might betray me. I glanced only at the plastic edge. 2:58 a.m., 15 minutes until 3:13. Another rule coming. Another line I couldn't break. Another trial. I breathed slow. Forced calm into bones, then a laugh, not a child. Not the suited man. Me. A perfect echo of my own laugh, whispered right beside my ear. But I did not laugh. A soundless shiver ran down my spine, lifting every hair like static electricity made flesh. I kept my eyes on the tile. I did not turn. If I turned, if I looked, if I gave reflection attention, it would feed. Through clenched teeth, I whispered, "You don't belong here." My voice shook. Not brave, terrified, but spoken. A long silence answered. Dark, thick, pressing. Then the voice, my voice, purred low from nowhere and everywhere. "Neither do you." The AC kicked violently, blowing cold air across my neck like breath. I jerked, heart clenching. Fear clawed my ribs like an animal trying to escape, but I didn't look. I didn't blink. I didn't move. And slowly, painfully, the presence withdrew. Not gone. Never gone, just waiting again behind glass. I curled tighter on the floor. The rules weren't protection, they were walls, and the thing on the other side wanted through. 3:13 a.m. approached like a blade drawing across my skin. I counted each second as though time itself was a creature stalking me, waiting to see if I would follow the ritual or collapse before I reached it. My nerves were threadbare. My thoughts frayed like rope dragged across stone. The building felt alive, breathing around me. The hum of the lights had changed pitch, deeper, vibrating in my sternum like a muted growl. Every shelf seemed to lean slightly inward as if the store was folding itself around me, sealing me inside its ribcage. I clutched the rule sheet, whispering the next step. Lock the register at 3:13 a.m. Do not open again. I didn't know what would happen if I didn't. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Rules weren't laws here, they were physics. Gravity, breath, blood. Ignore them and reality changed shape around you. Teeth first. When the clock hit 3:13, the register drawer rattled on once sharp. Like someone pushed it from inside, I jumped. Adrenaline surging through limbs so fast my vision blurred. "Do it," I whispered, voice trembling. My fingers fumbled on the metal lock. I forced the drawer shut and twisted the key. It clicked into place. Silence. Then, a low sigh from somewhere behind me, disappointed and ancient. But the store didn't break open. I was still here, still breathing, still obeying. My phone buzzed in my pocket. No signal, no notifications, just a single vibration, as if the phone itself responded to the ritual. I didn't look at it. Touching reflective screens felt like playing with loaded guns in a burning room. Instead, I stood icon slowly and forced myself toward the front windows. The night outside looked starless now. The darkness wasn't absence of light. It was presence. A thick liquid black pressing against the glass as though it wanted to seep in through the seams, drown me in a world I had no business seeing. Shapes moved within it, not walking, not crawling, but shifting. Like forms pressed against a membrane, sliding around the edges of existence. Trying to test where it thinned, I backed away. It was 3:23 a.m., too early for hope, too late to run. My heartbeat felt wrong, like something else beat inside my ribcage, matching my rhythm on a delay. My breath shook every time I drew it. I couldn't tell whether I was sweating or whether the air had become wet, humid with presence. To keep myself sane, I spoke aloud. A tiny voice in a place that devoured sound. I can survive this. The building disagreed. A bulb in aisle 2 popped, flickering, sizzling. The power stuttered. Shadows jerked unnaturally, stretching across the ceiling like fingers reaching for me. Rule number 6, keep all lights on, didn't give grace for panic. I sprinted, my shoes slapped tile, echoing too loudly. I grabbed the spare bulb from the shelf, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. As I reached the darkened aisle, something moved at the far end, tall, thin, head tilted too far, waiting in the shadow between light and blackness. I didn't look at its face, I didn't look at its hands, I kept my eyes down, unscrewing the dead bulb with trembling fingers, replacing it with the new one like my life was attached to its threads. When I twisted it tight, light burst through the aisle again, harsh, glaring, holy. The shadow thing retreated into nothing, dissolving like it had never existed. The desert here didn't need doors. It only needed opportunities. I stumbled backward, breath ragged, knees weak. 3 more hours. Time stretched like skin over bone. At 4:42 a.m., the first faint hint of blue bled along the horizon. Dawn. Not sunrise, just possibility. The suggestion of light, a memory of safety. My heart lurched with fragile hope. I made a mistake. I believed it meant something. The suited man appeared again, outside, standing at the edge of the dying night. He watched the horizon with hands clasped behind his back like a gentleman waiting for a train that would never arrive. His presence did not comfort. It warned. He lifted one hand, a subtle gesture, and pointed lazily at the horizon as the sky brightened further. Then he slowly turned his head toward me, and I understood. Dawn here was not salvation. Dawn was judgment. Light crawled slowly across sand like it feared the desert. The suited man smiled, not the stretched, unnatural grin from before, but something worse. Pity. He mouthed the words. Not yet. My blood turned to ice. The light stopped advancing, frozen, suspended above the distant hills like the sun held its breath and refused to rise. The faint glow stayed fixed, trapped, unable to breach whatever boundary held this place hostage. The sky brightened, but the ground did not. No shadows changed. No warmth seeped in. The world stayed locked in that half-light, the hour stuck between death and morning, false dawn, a trick, a test, a sentence. I dropped to my knees, not from reverence and from despair. My body gave out faster than my mind could protest. My breath came in sharp, choked gasps. I pressed my palms to the cold tile floor, forehead trembling against my clasped hands. No, I whispered. No, please. Something shuffled behind me, a soft dragging across tile. I didn't turn. I couldn't survive. Turning, hands, real or imagined, ghosted, up my spine like cold water. Then, footsteps, and human footsteps where I walked openly, into the store. I gasped and looked up despite myself, Harlan. He walked in like morning had truly arrived, like nothing unnatural breathed against the glass, like he'd simply stepped out for coffee and returned. He looked at me, sunken eyes, desert-worn face, and nodded once like he expected this. Did you follow the rules? My voice cracked. Yes, most don't, he said. They panic. They improvise. They die, I swallowed, throat raw. The sun didn't rise. It will, Harlan replied quietly. If it decides you're worth seeing it. Cold fear crawled under my skin. What does that mean? It means you're not prey, he said. Not anymore, you're observed. The word felt worse than hunted. Observed meant evaluated, measured, owned. His gaze drifted toward the horizon. Finish the shift. What shift? I rasped. The night never ends here. Harlan's voice was barely a breath. Then you keep the rules until it does. And with that, he walked past me, casual as if stepping over a crack in the sidewalk, ignoring the horrors as if they weren't horrifying, as if they were simply part of the job. Maybe they were. I stared at the frozen dawn, at the false horizon holding its breath. The light trembled once, like a heartbeat, then retreated, sliding back behind hills as though it had only been curious. Darkness reclaimed the world, and I understood something I hadn't before. Sunrise was not guaranteed. Not here. Not for me. I used to think horror was the unknown. The monster in the dark. The knocking you can't explain. The whisper without a source. But I learned something in that desert station. Terror isn't in the not knowing. Terror is in the moment you finally understand. When Harlan appeared, calm, casual, carrying a thermos of coffee like he'd just come back from a morning walk through a neighborhood that wasn't smeared with teeth in the dark, something inside me cracked. Not loud, not dramatic. A quiet splinter in the psyche. The kind you don't notice until you feel yourself leaking. He didn't rush, didn't panic, didn't even check the pumps or the cooler aisles. He just poured himself coffee into a chipped mug that had been sitting upside down near the register. The smell of it, bitter, burnt, grounded, felt violently out of place, the mundane cutting through the monstrous. I stared at him, throat tight, voice gravel rough from hours of whispered prayers to rules instead of gods. You knew, I said. Not accusation. Confession. He didn't look up. Of course I knew. You sent me here. My voice cracked. You didn't tell me anything. You wouldn't have listened. I would have. No. He cut me off softly but final. You would have run. Or doubted. Or thought I was crazy. Belief doesn't come from words here. It comes from surviving long enough to deserve it. My fists shook. My breath trembled. Fear twisted into anger, not wild, but sharp, controlled. You used me. I trained you, he corrected, sipping his coffee. The fluorescent lights flickered once, subtle, almost shy, like acknowledging his words. The desert outside roiled, a soft shiver through the dark, as if the world kept breathing in and out around us. My voice dropped. For what? His eyes flicked toward me, not cold, not cruel, but ancient, with exhaustion. To keep the line. I didn't understand. But the dread that crawled up my ribs didn't need understanding to take root. He gestured toward the window. What do you think this place is? A gas station, I whispered. Is it? He asked. I looked outside. Endless sand, roads leading nowhere, night that clung like wet skin, stars that hung too still as if pinned to sky with malice. The pumps humming like veins, the fluorescent glow trembling like fevered breath. No cars, no traffic, no world. I swallowed hard. No, I admitted. It's a gate, he said simply. The word felt heavy, like it pushed on the spine of the world. A threshold, he continued, between what believes in rules and what doesn't. I stared at him. What's on the other side? He looked at me then, really looked, and in his eyes I didn't see fear. I saw the weariness of someone who stood on a cliff edge a long, long time. You've already heard it, felt it, seen shadows of it in glass. My blood ran cold, the reflection, the voices, the wrong-shadowed man, the things testing the back door. What do they want? I whispered. His voice lowered, almost reverent. Freedom. My chest tightened. To do what? To be, he said. Without shape, without rules, without limits. I shook my head, dizzy. Why here? The desert doesn't pretend. He lifted his mug toward the window. Nothing grows, nothing distracts. Thin places gather where the world forgets to lie. Silence pressed between us. Finally, I asked the question gnawing through bone. Why me? Harlan set his mug down. For a moment, his hands shook, not with fear, but from the weight of endless nights carried alone. Because someone always has to be here when the dark remembers we exist. My voice was small. And you just leave us to it? You weren't left, he said. You were chosen. Chosen, I repeated, like the word tasted rotten. He nodded. Those who break don't stay. Those who survive become what stands between here and there. I felt sick. So I'm trapped. Trapped? He shook his head. No, bound by purpose. That's the same thing. Not to the desert. I put a hand on the counter to steady myself. How long have you been here? He didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Do you ever go home? I asked. This is home, he said. My skin crawled. I whispered, Where's the last guy? The one before me? Harlan's jaw tightened. He broke Rule 8. I closed my eyes, and they took him. They took what made him human, Harlan corrected quietly. Everything else stayed. For a while. A shudder ran through me, from scalp to heel. I remembered the tapping voice at the door, the mimicry, the patient hunger. He watched me absorb it. You lasted one night, he said. That is rare. Will I keep lasting? That's up to the rules. And you? I stared at the flickering neon reflection in the window without letting my gaze find myself. Then, I forced out a question that tasted like blood. If dawn isn't real, and when does it come? When it wants to. And if it never wants to? Harlan took another drink of coffee. Then we don't see it. I sank against the counter. Thought of my old life, my mistakes, my running. I thought I came here to disappear. Turns out I came here to hold back disappearing. I whispered, I don't want this. No one ever does, he replied. A pause, then softer, with something almost like pity. But the desert doesn't care what we want. It cares what we endure. Outside, something large moved beneath the horizon line, shifting the sand like a whale breaching beneath an ocean. Harlan set down his mug. Night's not done, get ready. Ready for what? He didn't answer. The lights dimmed slightly, like the station exhaled. The desert leaned closer. And I understood the truth fully. I wasn't surviving the night. I was being initiated by it, and dawn would only come if I proved I deserved it. Night doesn't fall here twice. It descends, it claims. It remembers you now. When Harlan's words faded into the hum of the fluorescent lights, I felt the shift, the world tightening like a knot around my throat. Last night I survived as prey. Tonight the desert watched me as something else, not predator, not protector candidate. I didn't ask what for. The question sat like glass splinters under my tongue. Asking meant wanting answers. And in this place, answers weren't gifts. They were traps. Harlan moved quietly through the store, lighting a lantern, checking the bulbs like a priest preparing a sanctuary. He didn't speak again. Didn't warn. Didn't train. The silent expectation in his movements said enough. You've seen. Now do. He poured me coffee. I didn't want it. I drank it anyway. The cup trembled in my shaking hand. Coffee tasted like burnt earth and metal, but warmth grounded me, tethered me to flesh. Stay awake, he murmured. Then he left. Not out the front door. Not out the back. One moment he stood in the doorway, lantern light brushing his jawline like a halo carved from dust, and the next, gone. Swallowed by the night like a candle blown out mid-prayer. His disappearance wasn't a trick. It was permission for the dark to start breathing again. I stood alone in the store. My heartbeat didn't climb, it sank. Deep, slow, like my body braced not for fear, but impact. And then the desert began to move. The ground didn't shake and it shifted. Like sand below the station tilted, like something massive rolled beneath the dunes. The glass rattled in its frame. The pump lights flickered once, twice. I ducked behind the counter on instinct, not kneeling, not yet. Not unless the third flicker came, it didn't. Instead, the radio turned itself on. No static this time. No voice calling my name. Just one long, drawn-out breath. A moan stretched too thin. A sound like memory dying, then whispering. Not one voice, dozens, hundreds, rustling like pages in an ancient book. A language without vowels. A language older than sand. I didn't touch the dial. You don't silence something when it speaks in a tongue older than time. The whispers built into a chorus, not screaming and singing. A low, haunting hymn that vibrated in my ribs. Something scraped along the roof, slow, heavy, dragging bone across metal. Not pacing this time, circling, claiming territory. The pumps clicked on by themselves, no cars in sight. No engines, no life. Yet gasoline began running. Meter wheels spinning, hoses dangling like veins pulsing without blood. I whispered the rules again, voice low. Greet first. Stay inside, static, no reflections. Lights on, no pump 11. Lock the register. Don't open the back door. My voice sounded practiced now, steady. That terrified me more than anything. Then, headlights. A car drifted into view. Not arrived. Drifted like it glided on rails instead of wheels. A black sedan. Windows tinted so dark even light itself seemed afraid to touch them. It rolled to a stop at pump 9. The engine idled with a low hum that sounded too rhythmic, like breath, not machinery. The pump beeped. Someone was inside that car, or something wanted me to believe it was. The radio whispered my name again, not pleading, not tempting, commanding. I ignored it and stared at the car. The pump handle jerked, clicked, stopped. No one exited. No door opened. But the sound of footsteps echoed anyway. Heavy boots on concrete. Approaching the store entrance. The bell chimed, soft, hesitant, like someone nudging it with a fingertip instead of pushing the door. Rule number 1. Took over me automatically. Welcome. My voice didn't even shake this time. That scared me worse than any monster here. The door didn't open, but something pressed against the glass. A shape blurry and rippling, like water reflecting a face that wasn't human enough to hold steady. It whispered, "You remember us now." I didn't answer. Silence pressed in like a hand closing around my skull. Then, in the reflection of the freezer door, faint, shaking beneath the brown paper, I saw the silhouette of a head turn away. It moved to the side of the building. Then the knocks began, not frantic, not desperate, rhythmic. A slow ritual drumming against the walls, moving from front to side to back, like something traced the edges of the station, drawing a perimeter in sound, not trying to get in, marking, counting, claiming. My pulse hammered as a realization crawled up my spine. This wasn't an attack. It was a ceremony. A second figure appeared outside, tall, thin, jerking like a marionette pulled by uncertain hands. Then a third. Then more, shapes drifting out of the dunes like mirages made flesh. No footsteps, just arrival. They ringed the station, swaying slightly as the whisper chant rose thicker around me. Pressure built behind my eyes, behind my teeth. Behind bone, my vision jittered, the fluorescent light stretching into long beams like the world smeared sideways. Something was crossing over. The suited man appeared again, inside. By aisle 3. He didn't enter. He manifested, stitched into the air like he'd always been there, and reality simply remembered him. "You endure," he said, tilting his head. "Not enough yet," I swallowed, throat raw. "What do you want from me?" He lifted his hand, palm upward, offering nothing and or everything. "Compliance is not loyalty," he murmured. "Fear is not faith. Obedience without understanding is fragile. I'm not here to worship you," I said through clenched teeth. His smile widened. "No. But you will learn who deserves your reverence." The radio crackled. Behind it, a deeper voice, layered. Ancient, thousands speaking as one, echoed like mountains, groaning, "Prove." The suited man stepped back and dissolved like dust swirling into shadow. The chanting outside stopped. Silence, struck like a hammer. Then a single voice whispered through every corner of the store at once, and above me, beneath me, inside my skull. One more night. My heart froze. They weren't hunting me. They were grooming me, training me, recruiting me as guardian, or servant, or sacrifice. I don't know which terrifies me most. Outside, the horizon trembled again, not with sunrise, but with something trying to push through. The desert didn't want dawn yet. It wanted proof. Proof I belonged. Proof I deserved to stand between worlds. Proof I could kneel if the lights died, or stand if they survived. This wasn't survival anymore, it was initiation, and the night wasn't done consuming me. I always thought terror peaked when you're closest to death, when you think a thing will take your life, gut you, swallow you whole. But there's a deeper fear that's worse than dying, worse than being hunted. The fear that something ancient has plans for you, and that you're starting to fit them. The store hummed around me, lights trembling in their sockets. The air vibrated like a struck tuning fork, reality ringing, desert breathing, rules sharpening like teeth. Outside, the figures ringed the station, swaying as if caught in a soundless song. Their forms weren't bodies, they were ideas of bodies, shapes forced to hold flesh only for the sake of mockery. Shadows pretending to learn human posture, and they were waiting, not to kill me, to see what I would do next. My stomach twisted. My bones felt hollow, like fear carved marrow away to make room for something else. Then the lights flickered, once, twice. The air in my lungs froze. Instinct, training, terror, whatever it was, grabbed me by the spine. The suited man's words rang in my skull. When lights fall, kneel. I had no rule for this. No laminated line of safety. This instruction came from the thing in the suit, not Harlan. Not the human side of the rules. I was being given a test from the other side. The lights paused on the second flicker, hanging in a thin thread of buzzing electricity. Time held its breath. Every shape outside leaned forward, heads tilting, eyes or not eyes waiting for my decision. If the lights died. If I kneeled. Was I submitting? If I didn't, was I condemning myself for defiance? There are moments in life where choice is illusion, where every option ends at the same pit. The desert didn't want obedience. It didn't want rebellion. It wanted to see. So I waited. The third flicker came. Dark swallowed the store in one violent inhale, lights dying. With a sound like a gasp, and I dropped to my knees. It wasn't surrender, it wasn't devotion. It was instinct born from a place deeper than survival. A promise to something that demanded ritual, not reasoning. My forehead touched tile, my palms pressed flat. Not prayer posture, but penitence. In the dark, the world shifted its weight. A silence so thick it scraped against my eardrums filled the station. Then, a slow, deep exhale. Not from me, not from outside, from everywhere. The lights snapped back on. When I lifted my head, there was someone standing in front of me behind the counter. Not a monster, not a shadow. A man. Harlan. Only not. His skin was cracked like dry riverbed clay. Lines etched into him as though the desert carved him grain by grain. His eyes were sun-faded, like they'd watched thousands of false dawns. He stared down at me, breathing slow, steady, dust drifting from his clothes as if he'd walked out of a grave made of sand. "You kneeled," he said. Not praise, not anger. An observation carried by wind. "Yes," I whispered. "Why?" I swallowed. My voice came out hoarse, scraped raw. "To live." He shook his head slowly. "To be chosen." I felt cold bloom through my stomach, spreading outward like frost. "I'm not one of them," I whispered. "No," Harlan said. "Not yet," the floor creaked. The figures outside shifted, waiting, watching, and if I refuse, I asked, if I try to stay human? Harlan's voice softened. "Then the night will take you in a different way." I stood slowly, balance shaky, bones tired like I'd aged a decade in one motion. My hands shook, but I forced them still. "What am I becoming?" "A witness," he murmured. "A warden. A hinge." He raised one weathered finger and tapped the rule sheet still clutched in my hand. "These aren't protection," he said. "They're introduction." A chill laced through me. A knock came at the door, soft, gentle, polite. A child's knock. Then another. Then another. Like 30 little knuckles tapping in playful rhythm. I didn't look. Harlan glanced toward the sound, indifferent. They want you. The night is trying you. And you... He paused, a breath. A judgment. You did not break. I should have felt proud. Instead, nausea crawled up my throat. The suited man appeared by the door. Not walking in. Materializing like he stepped through time instead of space. His voice stroked the inside of my skull like silk dipped in venom. He kneels correctly. He looked at me, eyes blank, dead, hungry for meaning. Rise. I stood. Not because he commanded, but because I refused to kneel again. My legs shook anyway. Harlan did not stop me. The suited man tilted his head. The desert sees you. The lights flickered again, once. Briefly, like a wink from something cosmic. A test passed, a threshold crossed. The suited man smiled. Not kind. Not cruel. Merely satisfied. You will finish the shift. My voice cracked. And then? Daybreak comes to those who are recognized. And if I'm not? I whispered. Harlan answered. Then you won't see another night. You'll become it. My blood ran cold. The suited man dissolved into dust. Outside, the figures retreated, sinking back into dark dunes like wolves slinking away, satisfied that the prey might yet become one of them. Harlan touched the counter lightly, as though blessing it or chaining me to it. Finish, he said. Endure, and dawn will judge you. He began to fade, not vanish, but blur, like sand stirred in hot wind. I reached out, desperate, terrified, angry. What if I don't want this? He met my gaze, tired, ancient, honest. No one here ever wanted it. Then he was gone. The station hummed again. The long night exhaled. The rules lay before me like scripture carved into bone. And outside, the horizon glimmered faintly. Not sunrise, not yet, but the idea of it. Waiting to see if I deserved it, I pressed my palm to the counter, grounding myself. Survival wasn't the goal anymore. Recognition was, and I was terrified I was earning it. There is a kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, a quiet made of held breath and suspended judgment. That was the gas station now. Not safe, not calm. Waiting. Like the entire desert had turned its head toward me and whispered, "Prove you deserve light." I stood behind the counter, hand still pressed against it as though the laminate could anchor me to reality. My bones felt hollow. My skin felt like paper. My heartbeat wasn't racing anymore. It beat slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. The rhythm of something learning a new shape. The fluorescent bulbs hummed uneasy. The cooler compressors sighed like they had lungs. The neon open sign flickered in slight spasms, as if even it no longer believed the message. I checked the clock, 57. I'd once thought dawn was salvation. Now it was a verdict. Outside, the darkness didn't recede. It thinned like a sheet stretched taut over something bright beneath it. The world beyond the glass shimmered with a pale bruise of light trying to bleed through, a promise or a warning. I whispered the rules again, not superstition now, but discipline. Greet first. Stay inside, static, no reflections. Lights on, no pump 11. Lock the register. Don't open the back door. Each line felt less like instruction and more like identity. I feared what that meant. Then I heard it. A sound like sand shifting under weight. Slow, heavy, approaching. I straightened, reflex ready to greet whoever, whatever, crossed the threshold. Rule number 1 was instinct now, but the bell didn't chime. Silence returned. Heavier now, denser. A moment passed. Then something thumped against the side wall of the building. Not a knock. A body hitting stucco. A sound full of meat and bone and momentum. I flinched. My hand hovered near the flashlight like muscle memory remembered safety routines from a life before rules meant survival. Another thump. Closer this time. Dragging followed. Wet. Rhythmic. Something being hauled. Something that didn't want to stop moving but no longer had the strength to walk. Then a voice. Ragged. Torn. Shredded like someone had screamed through gravel for hours. Please. Help. Not a mimic. Not a trick. A human voice, I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to. But after this night, faith in humanity felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. Still, that voice cracked something fragile inside me. Something that remembered the world before this desert claimed me. I stood frozen, torn between duty and instinct, between mercy and rules carved into fear. A hand slapped the glass. I jerked back. It was real. Flesh, not shadow. Palm split with cuts caked in dark grit. Fingernails chipped, one torn clean off. A wedding ring embedded in swollen skin. A man's voice sobbed through the door. "They're coming. Please, please let me in." My lungs tightened painfully. I forced out a whisper through clenched teeth. "I can't." He slapped the glass again, weaker. "I don't want to die out here." His words choked off into a scream, cut short and muffled like something covered his mouth. His fingers clawed at the door, leaving streaks. Then he was yanked violently sideways, leaving only bloody smears sliding down the glass. Silence swallowed the world. I sank behind the counter, shaking. The rules vibrated in my bones, cruel but true. Do not help. Do not open. Do not interfere. This station wasn't a refuge. It was a filter, and I wasn't just surviving it. I was becoming part of it. Something inside me twisted. I didn't know if it was guilt or transformation, maybe both. The floor creaked, not from footsteps. From weight shifting in the structure, like the building inhaled. The radio clicked on without static. A single voice, impossibly deep, layered like mountains speaking, uttered one word, "Continue." Then silence. I pulled myself up to stand again, shaking, hollow, awake in a way that hurt. Outside, the darkness trembled. Light swelled beneath it like an egg about to crack. Not sunrise yet, but pressure, expectation, judgment, I whispered. I did what the rules said. The store didn't reply. The neon sign buzzed, stuttering. Each flicker echoed in my bones like a heartbeat shared with the building. Then a thought slid through me. Not outside, not inside, but placed there. You didn't disobey. You didn't falter. You didn't save. You didn't damn. You waited. The desert likes obedience that is not blind, suffering that is not loud, resolve that doesn't scream. It endures. Maybe that's how wardens are made. The horizon brightened another shade. The world waited again. And then, without warning, the back door unlocked. Click. A clean, mechanical click, deliberate, meant to be heard. I spun, heart slamming into ribs. The metal handle jiggled once, gently, like an invitation extended with a white glove. No knock followed. No voice. Silence dared me. This wasn't a breaking of rules by entities outside. This was a test of me. Open the door. I submit to the night. Refuse, I assert I am no longer prey. But the rules still bound me. The warnings still lived in me. I backed away slowly, shaking my head, whispering until my throat felt raw. No. The handle stilled. The lock clicked shut again like a teacher marking a correct answer. And then, finally, the first true beam of sunlight pierced the horizon. It didn't burst. It seeped, crawled, claimed 1 inch of sand at a time. The figures outside froze, silhouettes stunned mid-breath. They didn't vanish. They retreated beneath the day like burrowing insects, sinking into the dunes in a slow, shuddering wave. The radio shut off. The hum softened to something earthly again. The desert exhaled. Light breached the station windows, touched the counter, touched my shoes. It did not burn, it warmed, and I sobbed. Not loud, not broken, just a quiet release of air and exhaustion and fear and something almost like awe. I survived. No, I endured. The shift ended, but I didn't feel free. I felt chosen unwillingly, uncertainly, but undeniably, and the sun touching my skin felt less like safety and more like a crown being placed on a head that never asked to wear it. Daybreak had a price, and I had paid.